And here we go. Okay, so our Borders and Flourishes workshop, we're not going to go over many or maybe none of the letter forms, depending on time. I just want to go through some playful borders, like a column,
Okay.
or something like that, or some flourishy vine work, and then you can have that vine wrap around a pole, and I think it's kind of a fun thing to do. So
Yeah.
here we go. What kind of paper do you have?
I have blank paper, like computer paper. I have line paper. That's about it.
Line paper, use lines. I'm gonna have my graph paper,
Okay.
and orient your lines so that they run vertically rather than horizontally.
Okay.
And I'm gonna go ahead and my ink is starting to dry just a little bit on my nib. So I might have to get that flowing again. There we go. Yeah. So this is our foundational idea to start with. We're just going to practice this wave shape. I think it works best to go to the left first and then peel around and go to the right. So if you have a line, say, I'm going to give myself, oh, my ink is really drying out. Interesting. If I give myself, let's say, two squares on my graph paper, I'm going to cover those 2 squares. Oops. And then just kind of start over and practice that shape over and over again. Do that a few times.
Okay. I wish I
And it
had
would
that.
be, and if you don't mind, Katara, it would be helpful for me to be able to see you so I can tell what you're looking at, if you're looking at me or if you're looking at the camera or what. Does that work? Cool. I'm going to switch my nib real quick without getting too messy.
Did you say Raga was supposed to be on this?
She was.
I can message her real quick and see. She's still coming. She was just in our wellness center meeting, so.
Yeah. Send her my apologies. And I'm going to go ahead and do this for us as well. I meant to, I want to highlight my video, which I've been able to do in the past. Oh, come on. So using our vertical, arms as our guidelines, I want to start a little bit, almost halfway through or almost halfway between them when I start my shape, and I bump into it and then kind of, work my way around. And then what we're going to end up doing is tying those together along a vertical line. So I think we can go ahead and do that. I'm going to start back over here. And if I stick to a two square width, my second one is going to start as I bump into that, as that slope starts to come down. And I'm going to try to parallel that same slope. And I aim for where that last piece finished. I'm just going to repeat that pattern. It starts to look like a braid.
Ooh, it does not look as good as yours.
Well, and also remember that I have the thin and thick distinction with my pen pressure, and so that makes it look different.
Right.
But the curve of the line being consistent and the parallel strokes, right? That diagonal stroke, you want to be parallel from one to the next, and that'll give you that consistent look. So go ahead and do that again, and then we'll start to cap it off before too long.
There we go.
Yeah, it's starting to become a little more uniform. Cool. So when you have a column that looks good, go ahead and give me a look.
Okay, let me try one more time.
Yeah.
I'm kind of struggling with they're kind of like
Diagonals, yeah.
a little slanted, but
So here's what I try to do. As like you're talking about, if I speak to the point, like right as you make that line, yes?
Yep.
Sometimes it's at a different angle, right? Or maybe
Yeah.
it's too sharp. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I really try to eyeball what I did on top, and then I try to match it. So whatever the first one is, that's going to dictate all the other ones down.
Yeah,
So I just try to match that angle on every time. And then that kind of gives us some freedom control though too. And I started to make a wider column, but you could also make those curls happen more frequently by having a sharper angle, right? If I'm more parallel as I come across, then I'm going to have more of those per distance. And it might make it easier to do. It might feel more like an S. But the idea is the same. And then if you tie off the ends, you can connect them kind of as you go. I'm not as practiced in that form, so it doesn't look as good for me. But here's what I wanted to do. If you have a column that looks okay, I'm going to take this second skinnier one. And I'm going to say this is my base. So I'm just going to draw a line across it. And then when I start my next one, I'm going to finish at that base.
Okay, and just cut it off halfway.
Yep. And then same thing on the top. And it's always a little tricky to try to, it's not going to be exactly perfect, but good enough.
How long did you say you've been doing this for?
Oh gosh, I started dabbling in calligraphy when I was in high school.
Oh, wow.
And I just never gave up on it. I didn't ever practice hardcore, but I just kind of kept chipping away at it. And I'd buy a book, an instructional book or two, and then mess around for a little bit and then come back to it. And it's been a steady thing. But I have never attended a live workshop. I would love to. Sometime in the next couple of years I will. So all my learning has been just books with different strokes and techniques and scripts, but it's fun. So here's a tip. I always find the top part is a little harder to match up than the bottom part, because I'm always, unsure. I could gauge my image there, but I start from this because I know what that loop or what that curl looks like. So I'm going to go in reverse direction.
Right.
And then that gives me my lineup to aim for, and then I just tie into it.
Okay. Not quite.
And when I have my top and bottom, fairly capped off, then you can get creative with it if you want. But I'm just going to do a basic C on each side to give it that end cap feel.
Right, pillar.
Yep. Pretty simple, but often simple means better. Sometimes you try to get too fancy. That to me feels good. And I'm just going to end it like that. And then you could make those be a standalone pillar. If I show this again, it's kind of that side stroke. And then one more piece, I guess we got to add our shading bits. So on the left side edge, for me, I feel is where it makes the most sense. I imagine the sun shining down, and this projects over the part that goes underneath it. So I'm going to give this a little shade, 3 lines on that left edge every time. And the leftmost shade line is a little bit longer, and it kind of tapers off towards the middle for those lines. Good?
Yep.
Ready to shift ideas?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. So the curl, that little S curl, is going to come into play again, but this time we're going to have it become in the form of a vine. We're going to wrap around a bar. So give yourself 2 parallel lines. Since I have my graph paper, I'm just going to follow those 2 parallel lines. And inside of a project, if you're doing this for a greeting card or something, I would certainly trace something or use a ruler to give me a nice straight edge on a beam. But,
yeah,
so I'm going.
perfect.
So I'm going to use that same left to right S and cross the beam, and then go behind the beam, and then cross the beam and go behind the beam, and just repeat that. And I think that simple thing looks pretty nice, doesn't it?
And are you kind of overlapping it a little, like going outside of those lines?
I am. Yeah, I hope that shows up well enough on your screen.
Yes, it's like barely there. I could
Okay.
kind of notice it.
Let's see if if I can get a little closer. I do elevate above and below. Yeah.
Okay. They're not connected at all, these lines? Like I'm not starting.
My starting spot does land on that beam,
Mhm.
and I go above it to create a little space, and then I cross it and I go over it again. Yeah. And so this one, it doesn't matter because it's a vine. It doesn't matter how consistent you are. If you wanted to give it some variability in terms of frequency, so I could, wrap more than one around itself and then space it out again. And it still looks good because it's it mimics a growing thing, which is not consistent.
Right. Okay, I'm definitely better at this than I am at the pillar.
The pillar gives good practice with that shape. And then so the way I tie off my column or my pillar, no, what's this called? This little beam. I do with a square that I have on my graph paper. I'm going to do 2 C's to fill the height of that square. And I put a circle on top of it.
Okay.
And that's just, a simple thing that I do. And you could certainly get more creative and fancy than that. I still haven't quite, if I connect it at each end, then it kind of looks like the beam goes through that end cap. But if you're better at your artistic spacing or imagination, go ahead.
I cannot say that I am. And then you're doing the same thing at the bottom minus
Yeah.
the circle.
Well, and I'll go ahead and do the circle there too. Just that one beam was, one little bar.
Okay.
And a helpful tip to make a circle is to draw it in 2 pieces rather than try to do it in one continuous movement. It's 2 C's that connect to each other.
Oh, wow, yes.
Okay, feel good?
Mm-hmm.
So let's add some flourishes to our vine, some kind of floral accents. And in this last one I drew, I have some spaced out wraps, and then it gets a little closer together and it spaces out again.
Mm-hmm.
But let's do two basic ideas. The first is a small curl. I hope you can see it with a dot on the end of it.
Kind of like a little leaf.
Yeah, well, not a, it's kind of like a berry.
Okay.
Does that show up?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
a thin line with a dot. And then opposite that, we will make a leaf, where I do a little teardrop leaf that feeds off, and again, I'll pull that up close.
Okay. Oh wow. I don't know if I can make mine look like that, but yes.
And I think the direction that they come off of the vine doesn't matter a lot. You'll have to see what you think works best.
Mm-hmm.
But if the vine is traveling, you know, you kind of want, you know, aesthetically, you want the piece to appear. For example, well, I guess it might be the same. So I might change my mind here. I think it's similar. Yeah, you have to experiment and see which way your flourishes come off of the vine and see what you like.
Okay. And where do you get your tools for this? Do you just order them on like Amazon or?
No, the best place, I'll go ahead and promote that right now. While you're practicing, I'll write out the website that has really good resources.
Okay.
So can you read that? JohnNeilBooks.com has introductory equipment, like, you know, a pen holder and a nib are really not that expensive. And then they have recommendations for different papers and things like that. And I'm honestly still exploring what kind of different papers and inks are out there. But there's certainly enough to get you started for not that much money if you wanted to play with these tools. Something that I didn't learn for a couple of years though is if you end up getting a nib, a dipped nib, and then, so for example, I'm using this inkwell.
Mm-hmm.
If sometimes the nibs come coated in a storage lubricant and you have to clean them before you dip them in, otherwise there's not going to. I remember when I was, you know, this was years ago, I get these new fancy nibs and I'm all excited about them and I dip them in my ink and nothing shows up on the, there's no ink on the,
What the heck?
I'm like, what the heck? And it just slips off because the lubrication was still on there. So you need to prep them by washing them in, I just use soap and water. I hear that some people can stick them in a potato and that does the trick, but I don't know how long you're supposed to keep them in a potato. But
Okay.
anyway, I just dripped some ink. I'm gonna go clean that up real quick. if you do end up getting an inkwell, another important tip is to have it on the right-hand side if you're a right-handed person. That way you're not reaching, for example, if this were over here, I would be reaching across my project every time I tried to dip, and then I might bump something or smear my wet ink.
Right. That's my struggle being left-handed, is that
Oh, you are left-handed. Okay.
as I write, I drag my fist across the ink.
Yeah.
Then a smear.
Josie, who was on earlier, she is also left-handed. And left-handed calligraphy is tricky because of the wet ink component. And if you go to look for tools like this is a right-handed tool.
So
They make one where the flange is on the other side. And then so. Anyway, let's keep going with our stuff. So let's see. Other options on our flourishes. We could come off of our vine, like the other things I did. I stayed inside the bar. We could come off and do the same type of stuff. But here's a couple designs. I'll make this bigger than usual. A little flower petal has a circle with 5 petals. And you could easily, attach that onto a little piece that comes off. And then one other fun flourish for that is just a curly Q, like a pig's tail, even though pig's tails are not actually like that. But if I stuck a few of those on.
Right, just like a couple like vines almost.
Yeah.
Are there any other flowers that are easy-ish to draw? But
Yeah, I think so. It's more like a leaf, but it has a bump in the middle. That come through okay?
Yeah.
And then sometimes I add a couple hash marks inside of it. That's a leaf, and if that had a vine, sticking out of it, then that would tie into that. Or you could have it overlap as another visual appeal. As far as other flowers, I'm not that good at other flowers, so I tend to keep it pretty simple.
This is already more elaborate than I do, or whatever, so.
And the good thing about the vine border is it's pretty small, and so all of your stuff can be pretty small, and then you can make more mistakes. Or it doesn't have to be perfect the smaller it is.
Right.
So.
Not as many details.
Right. Let's so I'm gonna progress to the next. Like our bar was our foundation of the vine with the flourishing. I'm gonna do this idea, and this really serves me well, and it's pretty simple. It's an S, but it's a shallow S with a loop, and then the loop repeats itself, and it alternates which side it happens on.
Okay.
And it's a really small loop. I hope that comes through in your image.
Yeah.
But one is counterclockwise and the other is clockwise, and it just flip-flops back and forth down a line. And you could make that curl around, but I think going down a line is easier.
It's hard to keep my S's like consistently curved,
Sure.
consistently shallow.
And what I would do, especially if you if you have lined paper, you're going to hug that line pretty closely.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you barely get on top of it or you barely get above it. And then the little loops tend to happen right on top of that line.
Okay. Okay, yeah, following a line helps a lot.
Yeah.
I was kind of going in between two lines, but that gave me a little bit too much leeway.
And then once you have your foundation there, then you can start to embellish it again with the same type of stuff we just did. A little dot at the end of a thin stroke, a leaf on the other side. Maybe a curlicue, a little flower.
This is very therapeutic.
Good. Yeah, I think so too. It's a nice thing to come and, yeah, therapeutic is a good word for it.
Yeah, I like it. It's like a little bit of a meditation time for me.
It is. If you do end up getting some tools, there's a really unique tactile sensation with the pressure that you apply to make a thin versus a thick stroke.
Mhm.
And the tools are pretty sharp and they're metallic, and so they scratch the paper. And it's this audio scratching sound that complements the scratching feel along with the pressure that you're doing. It's quite a fun experience.
Yeah, I'll have to look into getting some.
So I'm gonna switch pages and just this is a practice page I was working on earlier, but to give myself a little more room. You ready for the next idea?
So,
This one doesn't have an S, but it has, it's down here. It's these opposite curves. And if I use, I'm gonna make sure you can see it. If I use a line as my guideline, I'm gonna float right around that line. I'm gonna approach it from the outside in and just make a rather long, shallow curve. And then I'm gonna start offset, not quite equal to, but offset, and approach that same line and repeat that back and forth, back and forth.
are these connected at all?
Nope. I'm aiming the top of my loop to make contact with that center line, but none of the individual strokes connect with each other.
Okay. Okay, I got you.
So I typically draw that vertically, but I would typically use it in a horizontal way.
Okay.
That's just me. I think it looks kind of like a wave, but I just think it looks better as a border for a horizontal idea.
Yeah, I agree.
And then another embellishment I like to put on there, where those two lines get close to each other, I can add a little swirl, and I do 3, and this type of tool makes a difference. But I'm going to do 3 half C's or half circles around those close points.
It almost looks like a ring around it.
Correct.
Okay, I like that. You're good. I was like, what is that noise? I'm just doing a class, but it's just me and him in there, so. You're good.
I did like a 2-second shower, so I wouldn't keep doing that. I'm like, I don't know if this is
Sorry, dude. It's a calligraphy class.
For what?
Work.
And so here on this middle one, as an example, I didn't get close enough, I think, on these two to make those rings. I think it would look like that one even got a little too spread out.
Right.
So the closer you get, the more it lends itself to those joining rings.
Mm-hmm.
And if it's too far away, I think it wouldn't look as good.
And do you kind of switch the direction of the rings, or I guess depending on?
I usually try to, yeah. I think that makes it look better.
Okay. Maybe I am an artist.
Yeah, they're looking pretty good.
Yeah, it's not bad.
Well done.
I definitely think that having that tool would make a difference.
Mm-hmm. So let me keep practicing Katera, but I'm going to go ahead and get a blank sheet of paper. And I'm going to write your name with a flourish and embellish it a little bit. Okay, let's try this again with a good A this time. Right there.
I'm kind of trying to mimic you, and it just does not look the same.
So if that's my foundation,
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to add, let's see. one of those. I'll put a few flowers and things on it.
I think a big misconception that I had about calligraphy was that it was all connected in the sense that you just did it in one swipe.
Right.
I think what makes it better is the fact that it's not.
It makes it a little more personal.
Right.
And if you find YouTube videos and things, there are kind of like Calligraphy Masters is a YouTube channel.
Mhm.
And they have some really good stuff on there, and they have challenges of like, you know, the most embellished capital letters without lifting the pen, and it's incredible. You know, they make it all swoopy and swirly, and that's a whole nother level.
Yeah, I'm not there yet.
Kind of like that as it is.
Looks great.
Okay, and then if I don't want to make it too strange, but let's see. I'm gonna do this.
Ooh.
And that little ring idea.
Yeah, I like that. And
Tie those two thin lines together.
yeah, and like the different sizes of the ring kind of adds some dimension to it.
You're right. Right. So I'm pretty happy with that. I don't think adding more would make that better. So I'm going to leave it alone. But if I pull up, and I'll come give this to you in the office someday.
Thank you. I'd love that.
I throw that up there. So here's an example of adding everything that we just went over,
Mm-hmm.
kind of to make this cool.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah, I like that. I like the pillars and the bar above that. I like that a lot. I wish I could have attended your other classes with like the writing and all that.
Yeah. Well, they're on the YouTube channel. If you
Okay.
find the recap, you can go over those. Or I imagine I'll be doing those more in the future because these are fun